David. I appreciate it, and appreciate everyone for attending. And I'm excited to jump into the set of questions that we have that specifically focuses on the founder's perspective. But before we do that, let's just do a quick round of introductions, and you can talk about very briefly what your background is and your interest in the world of mental health and what brought you here. So quickly, I'll start it off. My name is Andy Johns. Back in the day, I did a bunch of startup stuff, working at Facebook, Twitter, and Quora on growth. I was a former president and head of product at Wealthfront as well, and spent about 3 years helping start up an early stage venture capital firm called Unusual Ventures. I've now shifted out of the world of early stage startups, and I'm personally focused entirely on the world of mental health as it intersects with technology. So that's me. And then let's go ahead and kick it over to Alex, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Great to meet everyone. Hi, my name's Alex Friedman. Currently, I'm the entrepreneur in residence over at Techstars. I'm an accidental tech content creator where I talk a lot about mental health publicly on Twitter and on TikTok. I'm the founder of FounderGigs, which was acquired back in March. And previously, I was the program manager for both Techstars Austin and Techstars Impact. So I've worked with close to 1,000 founders, seen it all literally in this industry, I feel like at this point at a very early stage. So I love talking about mental health with founders, especially at a very early stage.
All right, thank you. Dan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Dan Siroker. My first startup was Optimizely, which I grew as the co-founder and CEO from 0 to $120 million in ARR and 450 people. And in that journey, went through lots of ups and downs, and ultimately, fell out of love with the business. And that was a source of a lot of burnout, a lot of resentment. I felt trapped, and we ultimately sold the business, which I'm proud of, but I think it was only a glimmer of the opportunity we had. And so I've since doing that, I had the experience of going deaf. I have a genetic condition where I go deaf at an early age, and that actually was a really eye-opening experience, because when I tried a hearing aid, it felt like gaining a superpower. And so I wear a hearing aid, and ever since then, I have been on a hunt for ways technology can augment human capabilities, give us superpowers, and that's what inspired me to start my new company, Rewind, which is launching actually on Tuesday, and it's essentially the equivalent of what a hearing aid is for hearing, but for memory instead. So that's and the journey for me in mental health has been realizing my experience in Optimizely and sort of falling out of love with the business, and then coming to a new business and starting a business, the one that's designed to be one I want to be at in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and really being purposeful about the problem we're solving, something that even on the lowest of lows, I can still get excited to wake up every morning and pursue what I'm doing. So that's my journey, and thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Heini, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Heini Zachariassen here. I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur, built companies. The latest one was Vivino, the world's largest wine app. We have around 60 million users all over the world. It's been an incredible journey. And I've been the CEO most of the time. I stopped for the second time about a year ago. And I'm just very, very conscious of mental health, and especially both physical and mental health in being a founder. I wouldn't say I've ever been diagnosed with anything, but I'm sure my wife thinks I have all kinds of diagnoses. But it's been a journey, and there's insane pressure on. And I actually came on this conference because I do startup videos on YouTube, and I did one on mental health. I had a fantastic coach on to talk about building a really good sort of daily rhythm, and so on for founders. And they got in touch with me saying, you should be on here. But something I find really, really important. That's also why I wanted to be on this panel, even though I'm sitting in a car. So, because I think it's very important.
All right, thank you, Heini. And last but not least, Ritika, you want to go ahead? Oh, we can't hear you. I think there's some audio issues.
Of course, because I've muted myself. Always someone, always somebody. I'm Ritika. I'm the co-founder of a company called Storyhackers, building curriculum at the intersection of writing and mindfulness. So mental health is near and dear to me, both on a professional level and on a personal level. Have had a lot of setbacks in my journey as a founder. Born and raised in Silicon Valley, spent most of my life there. And about 3 years ago, moved to a remote island to focus almost exclusively on self-reflection, self-building, observation, and to really commit myself to a lifelong journey into mindfulness.
Wow, that's fantastic. We'll have to follow up offline on questions about this remote island. All right, so to kick things off, I actually wanted to read a quote from a British writer and philosopher by the name of Alain de Botton. And then this quote will inspire a question that I'll follow up with. So the quote reads, "One of the interesting things about success is that we think we know what it means. A lot of the time, our ideas about what it would mean to live successfully are not our own. They're sucked in from other people, and we also suck in messages from everything from the television to advertising to marketing, etc. These are hugely powerful forces that define what we want and how we view ourselves. What I want to argue is not that we should give up on our ideas of success, but that we should make sure that they are our own. We should focus on our ideas and make sure that we own them and that we're truly the authors of our own ambitions. Because it's bad enough not getting what you want, but it's even worse to have an idea of what it is you want and find out at the end of the journey that it isn't, in fact, what you wanted all along." So to me, this inspires the following question. And you know, I think, Dan, you might have some interesting thoughts on this based on your intro. The question is, how does the startup idea you choose factor into your mental health? Is it essential to your mental health that you only work on a problem that you find fundamentally important to you as an individual? Or is it okay to work on something that may be lucrative or prestigious, yet not as fulfilling to you as a person?
That's a great question. And the answer for me is that it's okay, but it's like doing a startup on hard mode. If you are in love with the problem you're solving, it really builds resilience and gives you endurance and gives you sort of a well to which you can dip into on the hard days. I'll contrast my first startup, Optimizely, which was inspired by my work on the Obama campaign in 2007. I was the director of analytics on the campaign. I had this problem I kept coming up, which is basically easy A/B testing. I was limited by IT. So I started Optimizely to literally build the product I wish we had in the Obama campaign in 2007, 2008. And so for the first 3 years, that's all I was obsessed with, like just building the product I wish we had. And that got me through a lot. And then we actually achieved that goal. And I sort of fell out of love, as I said before. I just didn't even think to give myself a reason to want to be at the company other than just keep swimming, from Dory, and just keep swimming. And so that was a real missed opportunity, because I think there are opportunities to fall in love with the company after many years if things change and evolve. But I never thought that was my job. I was being too selfless to try to do what the company needed, like hire, as soon as I was good at something, hire somebody to go do it and move on to the next challenge the company was facing. And so I do think that's when it became harder for me personally. I think that's also when the company started to struggle. I wasn't as good at being decisive. I didn't have that instinct for what mattered, what didn't matter. And then fast forward to today, I'm building the product I wish we had that exists in the world. And I think Paul Graham talks about for founders, it's oftentimes it's hard enough to be successful. It's even harder to be successful building a product for somebody else. Somebody you don't care about the problem, you don't understand the problem, you wouldn't use it yourself. And so startups are hard enough. Why not build and solve a problem you care about, that you face personally, that you're passionate about? That's my 2 cents.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. How about you, Alex? It sounds like there was an exit fairly recently with your company, and I wonder if that's inspired thoughts around what you chose to work on previously and what you may work on next.
Yeah, it's funny because it's actually the company that came before the company I just sold that really inspires more of this conversation. Because for me, I started building it. What we did is during the pandemic, we held a bunch of small group video chats that allowed people to connect on different topics, right? And it was like my bread and butter for the first few months that we built it. We got a ton of users. It was pretty successful. And then the second I took on outside venture capital, it became a real business. And at that point, it became something that I was like, wait a minute, is this actually what I want to build? I got into this wanting to just help people. And now it's becoming metrics driven, and it's becoming like a thing that I need to draw people to constantly. And I need to be thinking about all these things. I realized really quickly that like money isn't my initial driver for a lot of the things that I build. Making a lot of money doesn't really like drive me forward. What drives me forward way more is just helping people and being really like present and authentic. So now I only build things that kind of feed into that greater vision for myself, and assume that stuff will work out the way it's supposed to, because I'm doing what I love and I'm doing it for people that I care about.
Yeah, you bring up a point you made in there too, that as much as from my experience being on the investing side and having also worked with a variety of entrepreneurs, is it's not only essential that they choose the startup idea that is most fundamental relevance and importance to them, but that they then also think about what is the type or source of capital that is not only appropriate for that business, but is the type of capital that they want to choose that's appropriate for the style of business they want to build. I found myself in a lot of positions, in a lot of cases, telling early stage entrepreneurs, like, great idea. This is absolutely your idea. That's exciting. I could see the enthusiasm in your face and in your body language. But for the love of God, do not take venture capital dollars if you can avoid doing so, because that may come in and really take this thing that you could build into a wonderful business that fits into the lifestyle that you imagine for yourself, and then apply all these external pressures that starts moving it away fundamentally from what your original intention was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best things that founders can do at an early stage is decide what kind of lifestyle and what kind of business they actually want to build. A lot of the time, I think what's most rewarded in the tech community are billion-dollar businesses or people that raise a lot of money. But in actuality, I don't think that actually makes a lot of founders very happy, because it means a different type of lifestyle. So I think it's really important for founders to really dig deep on themselves when they're in the early stages of building their business or before they build a business, and decide like what's actually going to make me happy long term.
Heini or Ritika, anything you want to add on this?
Just one thing. Yeah, I remember many years ago, someone came to me. I was really frustrated about something in the business and said to me, "Hey, the reason why you're frustrated right now is because you care. What you need to do is find a job that you don't care about. That makes a much easier job and life for you. Just find something you don't care about, do the work, and that's it." And I think that's the big paradox, that if you're going to be a founder, you have to care. Otherwise, you're just not going to do this, right? So it's really hard to find that balance. No, so sometimes you just have to say, okay, I can't do anything about it. I don't care. I might care about the business, but in this situation, fuck it, I'm just going to move on. So it's a bit of a balance, I think.
Ritika?
Yeah, I hear that so much, and would really love to just build on this conversation for just knowing what we want in life and committing our lives to that. I think it's interesting because I've gone through I'm 10 years into the journey with the same company. It's been sticking with it, wouldn't change the experience for anything. And for me, kind of, I've gone through moments where I've had really extreme passion in the business, and that passion followed by moments of having almost lost the business, and moments of going through a health crisis and needing to support family through their health crisis. And where I feel like I felt most at peace with the business was realizing that it was a part of a greater vision. Ultimately, rather than kind of falling in love with the business or what kind of the business could be, I've kind of gone through this experience of falling out of love with it, falling back in love with it, realizing that ultimately what's enduring is this connection to just the underlying vision to strive towards, and everything else. I've had to learn quite a bit of detachment, quite a bit of separating myself from attachment to outcomes, and it's been a matter of almost just coming home and realizing what does this fit into just purpose in life, and why I'm getting up every day doing this every day.
And just to punctuate this before we move to the next prompt, the general guidance that I'll give to a founder when they're asking this question around startups as it intersects with their wellness is I say, like, spend more time thinking through or feeling their way towards the business they want to build. I think so many startups fail primarily because the founders, due probably to external pressures and the prestige of wanting to be an entrepreneur and saying they have VCs backing them, they race to the idea. And instead of taking 3 or 4 months to choose that thing, maybe give it 2 years. It's through that slow matriculation of the feelings and thoughts that you may eventually fall upon the thing that feels much more like you're creating art than creating a business. And it's something that you look forward to doing every single day. So we lost Ritika for a moment. Hopefully she'll get back. Maybe the connection on the island isn't so great. But let's move into prompt number 2. And I think Ritika, I believe you'll have some thoughts on this. So maybe we can start with you on this. But it's been reported that entrepreneurs have much higher rates of clinical diagnoses like depression, ADHD, and bipolar disorder, anywhere between 2x to 10x higher than the average population. Dr. Michael Friedman, who's actually based in the Bay Area, he's one of the world's leading experts on entrepreneurship and mental health. He said this. He said, quote, "These mental health conditions are accompanied by positive traits that enable entrepreneurs to excel. If you have ADHD, 2 of the positive traits are a need for speed and an interest in exploration and recognizing opportunities. You have an ability to act without getting stuck with analysis paralysis." And so the question that I want to turn over to you folks is, has this been your experience as an entrepreneur, this sort of double-sided nature of some of your traits that can sometimes, dip one of your feet into burnout or overextension, but other times it acts as a superpower? Like, has that been your experience? And what are your thoughts around identifying those traits and how to integrate them in a way that's healthier and more sustainable?
Happy to kick off, Andy, and I'm so curious to hear everybody's response to this question because it's so individual. And I think just one observation that comes to mind that I personally went through is when you become an entrepreneur, you have so much decision making and driving decision that it's almost like there's a bit more detachment from this external world, and you're like just one with your own energy and your own thinking, and you're in your own head a lot. And just one technique introduced to me in therapy, and therapy is something that I advise. I think is great for anybody who is in this zone where you're creating this thing with an open door, an open runway, and almost kind of infinite freedom if you have it to make your own decisions, is learning techniques to work with your energy and to continually check in with yourself. I'd say in like the 2014 era, I was running into challenges of just having panic attacks and feeling really depressed and feeling like a failure. And I had no idea where these stories were coming from. And it took me a while to just understand this is what happens sometimes when you're in your own head and you're left to the faculty of not having a management structure in like in a company environment where the walls are just open for just so much thinking. And so something that has helped me a lot over the years is kind of learning those symptoms earlier and checking in with myself to understand where something might be manifesting as a strength or where something might be crossing over from a strength to a hyper intensity to a level of burnout or a level of depression or heightened anxiety. And it took, I'd say 2016 was when I started becoming aware of this through therapy, through mindfulness coaching. And really it took just concerted years to take a step back and think, okay, like this, when I'm feeling this way, this is the word that's going to this emotion. And this is the spectrum of all of the tiny steps until it gets to that extreme. And I think it's different for each person, but finding those symptoms earlier to just stay calibrated, stay balanced, which is where I'd say I'm at now. Not perfect, but something I've been really working towards.
Thank you, Ritika. Dan or Alex or Heini?
Sure. Yeah,
Dan, okay.
This concept of a double-sided trait resonates with me, especially on anytime I do a 360, which we do, even though we're a small 10-person team, we do 360s regularly. And oftentimes the thing that comes up at the top of your 360 in terms of how your team thinks you're doing is almost the flip of what comes at the bottom. And I like what Ritika said around staying balanced, because you need that self-awareness to recognize that. Example being, my team thinks I'm very decisive and I'm very, I have a strong vision, but that's the flip side of sometimes not listening as well. Maybe people not feeling heard because, I'm quick to make a decision. I'm being impatient. And so those, it's not to say your job is to mitigate all your weaknesses and to not, obviously I want to listen well, but you also recognize that some of your strengths come from your decisiveness. So I think that's definitely sometimes people make the mistake, especially, I did this in my first company where I had an executive coach and they gave me a feedback, and I thought my job is to be the best at everything. Where reality is the highest impact to the company is just to do the few things I do really well and just do more of that and not try to mitigate all my weaknesses, because in some ways you kind of mute your strengths when you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, and I'll share a quick personal anecdote on that. There was a point in time, this was about 2 years ago, where in the midst of doing my own internal mental health work, I had an epiphany. One day I realized, oh shit, I'm an addict, because it just sort of clicked in a way during a meditation, believe it or not, where that self-realization came into my mind. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to find a place. I'm going to go check myself in, and I'm going to go do the work I need to do to resolve this, because addiction is something that's very, very prominent within my family. And I realized that it was something that was within me. And so the experience I had as an addict, and it was almost identical to my experiences working at startups as well, is that initially when you have that realization about yourself, what most addicts will do is say, okay, my job now over the next 45 days to the rest of my life is to take that aspect of myself, that character trait, and I'm going to, just dig into my brain like it's a bowl of ice cream, and I'm just going to scoop that part out, right? It's this sense of like, I have to reject this part of me. But the thing that you ultimately learn is, no, it is that double-sided aspect of that character trait. It is a superpower, and at times it also gets out of control. And so the method is really about, once you identify what those high volatility traits are, it's about saying, okay, how do I take that trait and integrate it in a positive way where I point it towards something that's productive? Like the gentleman who started the addiction recovery center that I went to, him, in addition to the entire staff there, were all recovering addicts. And so the thing that he did was take the addiction that had, put real risk to his life And instead, he took that sort of compulsive energy and that intensity, and he pointed it towards, I'm going to build the best addiction recovery place I can. Right. And so it's much less about, let me take this part of me and throw it away. It's more about just the conscious awareness of, this is who I am. Now let me point it in a direction that is positive.
Yeah, I mean, one comment here. I sort of had a question almost. By the way, we could do just this subject is so big that it's interesting, right? So one question I had is, what actually comes first here? Is it that we have this diagnosis that drives us to become founders, or does the work turn us into, or is it a combination of both? When I listen to you guys, it sounds like we have something and maybe that attracts us to it, or maybe there really isn't room for us anywhere else, so we have to go in this direction. I think that's an interesting question too, because it is an extremely high pressure job most of the time that can drive you into something. But I do see a lot of my very successful friends, we all have some kind of diagnosis, not like some of them serious, but a lot of them just something, right?
Well, one data point I can share there is that the very, very high correlation, and in some ways causative, between a high ACE score, adverse childhood event, and being a founder. Oftentimes there's something about that experience in childhood, and I can speak personally, I had that, that can help frame you and prepare you, and maybe even excite you about the opportunity to kind of control and own your own company and be a founder. I'm part of a founder forum that we meet once a month, and probably the vast majority of us score high on that. So given that that is a score that only can be determined in childhood, and most people don't start a company in childhood, I think that kind of leads to, an answer to that question, on at least on the trauma that we face as kids.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Dan, to add on to that, it's nearly identical in the world of comedy. It seems that comedic genius often has its roots in pain, and so can art. There's something about difficult early experiences that shapes and influences psychology in a way that we often underappreciate or don't recognize. Alex, anything else to add, or shall we move on to the next prompt?
I think y'all covered everything wonderfully. So happy to move on.
Okay, all right. So the next one, the life of an entrepreneur can be chaotic. The unknown unknowns combined with complexities of daily life that we all have to deal with can make each day wildly different than the next. That said, I think it sort of stands to reason and is evident to a lot of folks that having a consistent routine and discipline is essential for success at anything, including the ability to maintain one's sense of well-being. So this is a bit more of a tactical question for each of you around, like, what role does discipline and a strict or somewhat strict routine play in your ability to manage your wellness while building a company?
I can start there. I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I just can't stress it enough. And this particular video I talked about that someone saw and said you should join it, because I had this professor on who talked about building that routine every single day to get the right performance. It turned out that my personal routine was pretty close to what he recommended. But I'd also seen what happens when I'm in the middle of a fundraise and, shit just goes south, right? Everything goes down. You can't sleep. Your performance goes way, way down. So if you want to do well, you need to get your exercise. You need to get your sleep every single day. Otherwise, you are going to fail. That's how I see it, or you'll burn out or something like that. Incredibly important.
Yeah,
go ahead, Alex.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just to add on to that, I actually recently changed my morning routine just because I used to wake up, go immediately to my phone, right? Go through my email, go on social media. And I realized that my moods throughout the day were horrible. Like, I couldn't get away from my phone. I was in a bad mood for whatever reason. And so now I've started doing the thing where you leave your phone across the room. You don't check it for the first hour of the day. Wake up, get ready, eat breakfast, go on a walk, do what you need to do. and then come back to it. And I've realized like getting outside for even just those 15 minutes every single morning, making sure that I'm prioritizing getting ready, the things that actually make me feel good as a personal human, not like from my business front. It sets the tone for the whole entire day. And then just like a quick shout out, one of my friends who works in this industry is actually developing an app called Founders First, where you can follow different founders' daily routines. So he has like a Navy SEAL on there. He has a ton of people who have done absolutely incredible things, who struggle with mental health issues as well. And you can follow their routines on a daily basis, which has been really, really cool to do. So if anyone's interested in that,
Cool.
for sure check it out.
Nice.
Yeah, I think this is super important. And I don't know if it's by necessity that I've developed this because I have 3 young kids, four and under, and a startup. But I think the book that probably influenced me most on this is The Power of Habit, which really helped me understand willpower and draining your willpower at the end of the day and decision fatigue. And since reading that book, I've sort of adopted slowly over time. I just say, I'll try it for 2 weeks and then see how it goes. I first became a vegetarian, just tried it for 2 weeks and that's not so bad. Now the thought of eating, an animal feels like I'm eating human flesh. Is like just disgusting in my mind. And like similarly, I did the same with stopping playing video games, and I've stopped drinking, and a lot of these things that are just things that seem seemingly overwhelming and difficult to do. Using the framework from this book and also just generally trying it for 2 weeks and then seeing the benefits have helped a lot. And specifically on drinking, I will highly recommend the book by Alan Carr, The Easy Way to Control Alcohol. I've read the book and haven't had basically anything to drink since. And Nikki Glaser, the comedian, actually recommended it to me on Joe Rogan's show. She similarly read the book, hasn't wanted to drink since. And the big insight from that book really is how using willpower to overcome and change your habits and is almost impossible. It's not about having more willpower. And that book really helped me see that, part of what it takes to build good habits is understanding what you get from those habits, what you don't, and sort of rewiring your brain to recognize things that are hurting you, things that are helping you. So I definitely think it's important. And I don't think I'm any less happy because I don't drink or I don't play video games or I don't eat meat. I'm actually much, much happier because of those habits that I've formed over the years.
And what was the name of that book again?
The 2 books, one is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and the other one is The Easy Way to Control Alcohol by Alan Carr. He has a whole bunch of books, a bunch of easy way books. He's most famous for writing The Easy Way to Quit Smoking. This particular book was, very, very influential for me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think one thing I'll add in is the way that I managed to find a balance between discipline, but allowing room for the chaos is I approached my work with what I called the bookend approach, which was like that first 2 hours of the day, super disciplined and structured. The messy middle, shit comes up. I just allow the chaos to sort of unfold. But those first 2 hours of the day kind of gives me like this cloak of calmness that allows me to then proceed through that chaos with little discomfort. And then the last 2 hours of the day, really structured discipline. So for me, it's like first 2 hours was I get up early, usually around when the sun's coming up. I'll sit there in bed and ideally do a simple meditation, get my mind calm. And then it's into a quick cold shower to get my body alert. So I have that combo of a calm mind, but an alert body. And then to what Alex said is I immediately go outside and I get sunshine. I'll just walk around to the neighborhood, listen to a podcast, anything that feels like it'll be calming and enjoyable. And I'll spend 30 or 60 minutes outside. And then I start my day. And when I do those first 2 hours, it's like anything can happen in the middle of the day. And I'm like a rock with a wave crashing over it. It just doesn't affect me. But if I don't do those first 2 hours, then I'm a mess. Ritika, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, just I resonate with so much of these experiences and have kind of gone through the entire spectrum of trying to impose like a lot of self-discipline and sometimes realizing that even with that discipline, there's just so much out of control that like I just like, especially in the first couple years of COVID, I was just like, who knows what phone call I'm gonna get this morning, or Who knows? Just well, what do I need to be aware of in the media today? What do I need to hide from, or what's going on? And I was just like, I hear you so much, Alex, on picking up the phone, getting up, like jumping out of bed, and kind of found myself realizing that sometimes like a little bit of routine is better, like not the kind of like set the bar high and be like, get up, do my push-ups, like make sure I'm meditating every day. It just was not realistic for me. And it's been about little things. So one tiny thing I've been trying lately are affirmations. The night before, I'm like, one that I just used at my lowest. Just I'm like not getting, like, don't want to get out of bed, like I'm on the antidepressants. I'm just living it. I'm like, today is going to be the best day of my life. I don't pick up the phone. I leave the phone down. I wake up. I remember to tell myself, today is the best day of my life. And I found myself stepping into that, where it was almost this repetition of continued perspective. Well, like, what is the best day of my life today? You got horrible news again. It's realizing how much I can learn from that, and realizing just how great it is to be here right now, how life is a privilege, gift is a privilege, taking things moment by moment. Some days I'm just like, I need to learn how to just embrace this 1 second of life and to be here and not to be mentally anywhere else. Making sure that I'm, drinking the water, forget to drink the water. So almost like taking these little habits. And then another one has been creating intentional space to just be free. So for these 2 hours, I'm going to go sit on a rock outside, not taking any, or I'll have my technology for safety, because life can get a little dangerous. People can be in weird, violent moods sometimes. So keeping my distance from things, like literally just go sit in a rock and let myself be free, because there's so much that we are confined to. So it's little habits like that, and almost like it's like a Jenga game sometimes, because can't control kind of the outside world. You don't know when you have a doctor's appointment. You don't know when these little life things will happen. So thinking about it like that, piece by piece, and letting the force of stability come from the self.
Yeah, if I can just add, this is such an important point you said, is that doing things is so much better than doing nothing. It's not like everyone can run a marathon every morning, Ironman every week. Like, very few people do that. So just doing something puts you on a path to something better, and it's so incredibly important.
Yeah, there's a gentleman by the name of Rich Roll who he has a really good podcast, and he's actually a Stanford graduate. He was a lawyer, and he wrote a wonderful book. I think it's called The Plant Powered Way. But around the age of 40 is when he had sort of a fundamental change in his life, because he was an alcoholic and a functioning one, but he realized that his health and everything was just declining. And so he had to make big changes. But what he learned through his process of transformation and getting clean and sober and becoming this, writer and podcast host that he is now, is he talks about, a simple slogan he reminds himself of every single day, especially when he gets up. He says, mood follows action. So just do one thing that, even if it's, get up, make my tea, don't lay in bed, like your mood and how you feel immediately follows the action that you take. And so Heini and Ritika, to your point, just whatever those first few things are, if you can get that ball rolling down the hill, it'll be easier to make the right decisions throughout the rest of the day. All right, so we'll move on to, we got about 5 minutes before we start Q&A. So let's try and do our best to answer this question, which is really at the heart of what I've observed triggers a lot of mental health issues for founders, which is that intersection and relation with investors. And I don't know if any of you have had instances in the past where you've had a challenging interaction with investors. But like, what is your advice around navigating that relationship when there's the practical part of, okay, they provide me money and to an extent I'm accountable to them, but then I need to do what I need to do to take care of myself. That is a difficult balance to strike, but love your thoughts on how you approach that.
I have a couple of suggestions. One is just never give up control of your company. So you should always have control, and the day you give up control is the day you should accept you now work for somebody else. If you can, obviously not everyone has that opportunity. The second is recognizing if you do control the company, at the end of the day, your investors are just investors and advisors. They're not the CEO. And if I look back at the biggest regrets around strategic decisions we made at my first company, it all falls into the pattern of my gut says we should do A, somebody else, an investor, an executive, an outsider thinks we should do B. We end up doing B and it turns out poorly. There are plenty of times where we went with my gut and it turned out poorly. I don't remember any of them. All I remember are the regrets I have associated with going with somebody else's perspective or decision around pace of growth and how fast we should burn and all these things that, externals from their incentives point of view make sense because they want this to be a huge success. Internally, from my perspective, for my happiness, for the sustainability and the risk-adjusted return for the company, maybe don't make sense. And ultimately, those are the ones I regret. So I think part of the dynamic here is recognizing that as an investor, they have a say, they have input, they shouldn't have control. And you as the founder have the ultimate, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. There will be a day, even if your company is doing really well right now, there will be a day where your investors either stop caring or check out or literally write down your company. They literally just say, okay, this company's going to go zero. It's not going to be the next big Uber. And they're just going to stop. The worst thing is that they'll stop paying attention and stop caring to a point somebody said earlier. And so you should recognize you're going to hold the bag one way or the other as the founder of the company. So, go with your gut, both in terms of the pace of the growth, the strategic decisions, who you hire, who you fire, and don't be overly influenced. This is a mistake I made. I was too easily influenceable by these, supposed experts who've been there, done it. But then I had to live with the consequences of following their best advice.
Great answer.
Yeah, that was so spot on. The only thing I would tack on to that is not all money is good money. At a very early stage, like make sure you're taking investors or make sure you're taking money from the right investors for you and for your business, because that can really drag down everything after a few months.
And to extend to that, right? A few rules that you can apply, right? Find people, obviously, that are professional investors. I think that's important. Make sure they've been entrepreneurs before and they can lose the money. They can afford to lose the money. I think that's really important. And the last thing I want to say is also realize that there is misalignment. I think you said it before too, is that, hey, there is misalignment sometimes. They're going to push all their horses really hard and hope that one of them makes it. And you don't have the same interest as a founder there. You want to make it nice and make the money. That's much better than push and break. So there is misalignment, and realize that. I think that's important.
Back those two thoughts. You said that not all money is good money. I'll say not all good money guarantees good advice. They will give good advice for their best interest. But when times, when push comes to shove, when you're about to sell the company, when there's an inflection point, when you're about to raise money, they will act very rationally and to their credit in their best interest. And you need to recognize the difference between your best interest and likely what's most aligned with the common shareholder's best interest and your investor's best interest. And don't confuse the two. There's very often at those moments of inflection when it matters most, you have different incentives and different aligned goals.
Yeah. And I'll say one quick thing, referencing it from when I was a professional investor too. There's actually an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, because often you may even get good money, but the way the investor approaches you is aggressive or forceful or can be demeaning. And I'd say the number one thing is, and this is a practice for your own mental health, is this is an opportunity for you to set boundaries. You can say, hey, I appreciate feedback. I like substance, right? But the way in which you're speaking, that is unacceptable for me, right? Like, this is an opportunity to set boundaries. And related to that is the really good investors that I know, they would actually like to see that, because sometimes investors get really worried when the CEO always capitulates, when the CEO always says, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. What an investor is sometimes looking for is for the entrepreneur to say, I hear you, thank you for the thoughts, but no, that's not happening. and to have a very strong opinionated response back, because that's when an investor looks at you and says, ah, this is a CEO. That's what a CEO does. Yeah.
Don't tell them what they want to, what you think they want to hear.
That's right. Set the boundary if they're crossing them, and then stick to your guns. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the Q&A. We got a bunch of interesting questions here. Let's go from the top. So number one, I often feel sticking to healthy habits, taking a walk, making healthy food, working out, and other daily activities end up taking up so much of the day. How much of your day is spent doing deep work on your startup versus the planning versus mental health versus management and family? So I guess the question is like, what's the rough percentage breakdown? And are there any sort of guideposts that you would offer?
I have a super hacky, the best advice I've ever gotten and given on this is 3 words: walking, treadmill, desk. As I do meetings, and I would do it now, but it's rude. I have a desk here. I've got my laptop. That's me on a treadmill. And all day, every day, I walk while in meetings, while I'm coding, while I'm thinking. And yeah, it makes it feel like an or, but it's an and you feel better. You're more creative. You have more energy. Everything about it is better. So that's my recommendation on this. And if you do that, if you walk every day, I try to walk 15,000 steps, then the other habits are easier to fulfill too. You feel you feel better. You're walking, so you're eating better, et cetera. So walking, treadmill, desk. That's my advice.
Amazing parallelization. I love that. It's an and, not an or.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I spend an hour walking every day too, but I would do that outside. But I can also combine that. I have the headset on here. I can do a couple of calls. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I would just listen to a podcast or whatever. But that hour gives you so much. So I think that's fine. And also, I mean, you waste so much time everywhere, right? So I also do rowing in the morning, and I would watch the news and sort of get updated in the morning while I do my rowing for 20 minutes. So you can combine things with either things that are useful or just time wasted.
I don't know if I have like exact percentages, but I will say making things as easy as humanly possible for you to do the healthy things makes life so much better. Like Dan was saying with the walking treadmill desk, like that just makes walking easier. Meal prepping makes eating healthy easier. Putting out your clothes the night before makes getting ready in the mornings easier. So like starting to do all these habits when you do have time makes it compounds over time to make things a lot easier for yourself.
Alex, building on that, for me, like I've learned how to integrate these things into my day. So I'll show you the last 2 places where I've lived. I've actually so I've learned martial arts, and I turned my living room into a dojo. And there's weights. I don't know if everybody can see, but just a way to integrate it into days, and also just like for that mental stimulation too. Like one thing I'm trying to learn now is yoga, and just start like if I'm on a call, like just go do yoga while I'm on the call and listening, and try to integrate that into more of a continuous lifestyle, because I've always struggled with hey, got to set 2 hours here to do this thing. Doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm. All right. The next question is, when do peer groups and founder forums work well, and when do they not?
So I was a member of YPO for like 70 years. This is Young Presidents Organization. It's been around forever. It's all over the world, actually. So I do recommend that. I took what I liked about that and then brought it to the founder world by First Round Capital, one of our investors, does a sort of short 6-week program like this. And I joined 2 of them. I cherry picked the very best founders who I really thought were vulnerable and authentic. And I invited them to meet with me once a month for 2 hours over Zoom. And we've been doing it for 2 years now almost. And it's amazing. So if you can't find what you're looking for there, create it yourself. There are people, and I think the last speaker mentioned it's a lonely job. There are people who seek this out, and given the right structure and the right format, I'm happy to share tips. I'll find people interested on how to structure these meetings. But an opportunity to be vulnerable, be authentic, share the things you can't even share with your co-founder because they're existential. That's been just amazing. So I recommend creating this for yourself, make it a safe spot, and find other founders who you connect with to make a good environment. It's like group therapy is the best way to describe it.
That's not $250 an hour.
Right.
Okay. Anything else from Ritika or Heini or Alex? I mean, I second the notion of like create your own tribe. It's always the most powerful one.
Yeah, me too. I have a problem with these organized things where I go into something. I gotta find my own people somehow.
Just love being around people who can just get out of their own heads together. Sometimes it's so hard to forget we're just like on a rock flying through space doing this absurd thing that is living and forming societies. So try to, in these circles, I'm like, I kind of want to try to not talk about being a founder as much as possible. Let's go back to who we are.
Yeah. Carving out that time to just have, call it, normal conversations and with a dose of cosmic insignificance therapy on top. Yeah.
And laugh.
Okay. Another question from the crowd is, how do you see the difference between therapy and coaching? That's a good question.
I have a hot take on this, which is I think the best coaches are all therapists. I was lucky enough to have an executive coach who did at my last company, who was the executive coach of the stars. He worked with Mark Zuckerberg and Drew Houston, all the big names. And he was basically a therapist. He was actually a clinical psychologist, psychiatrist. He could just charge more by saying he was an executive coach. And all of our time together was really digging into the things that a therapist dig into. That just happens to be paid by the company in a company conference room. And those are the highest impact things. So that's my hot take. Maybe there are other people out there who are good coaches who aren't therapists, but that's been my experience.
Anyone else?
I'll add on this too, that like, I don't know if you've been seeing what's going on Facebook or Meta, but like Mark Zuckerberg isn't a robot. I bet you right now he is getting therapy / coaching every week. Like these people who we look and sort of sometimes, maybe Zuckerberg's not a good example, but we put on a pedestal. They're humans too. They're struggling with the same things that founders with a company without product market fit struggle with. And it doesn't get easier. That's the other thing. You'd think by now he would be like, all right, I'm good. I got my island in Hawaii. I don't need pressure. But like, imagine the world, it's even harder now with the scrutiny of everyone thinking he's crazy for doing what he's doing and spending all this money. So, this is an ongoing process. It's not one of those things that once you've made it, you're done and you can check out.
Yeah. And to double down on that, like all the memes around him doing jujitsu and surfing and all that stuff. It's, it's like, oh, here's this rich person who's off just, not even paying attention and not where it's like, no, this is how he stays sane. This is like, you can't imagine the pressures of that. Well, here's a good one. I really love this question. What would you recommend to your younger self now, or those who are just starting on their journey in dealing with the pressures to perform? There's a lot there to unpack. So if you want to take a second to think about it.
It's not all on you. Rely on your village. Lean into support systems. Learn how to put words to emotions. That thing you're feeling doesn't have to be expressed through a destructive behavior. Pause and reflect more. Keep increasing the distance of self-reflection, and don't take yourself quite so seriously.
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one because I wanted to say, hey, cool the fuck down. Don't go too crazy. Don't push that hard and so on. But at the same time, it's a little bit of a paradox because I wanted to perform. I wanted to do well. I wanted that person to sort of push and make things happen, right? So, but I still want to say, hey, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, right? Something like that.
I'll just echo what I said earlier about the points where I want to do, my gut says decision A and I was influenced to B. My advice to a younger self would be have more confidence in my conviction. Even though I was less experienced, I was living this business every day. I'd founded it. I understood the problem. And I was too willing to let somebody else's agenda or perspective influence me because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to listen to advice. You're supposed to take people who have experience. And so you will rest easier. Even if you make more mistakes, you will rest easier going with your gut and you will have fewer regrets. You may not succeed. That's possible. You may have bad ideas but you're going to at least have fewer regrets if you went by somebody else's playbook than by your own.
I think the advice I would give my younger self is don't take advice from people who don't live the life that I actually want to live. Is probably the number one thing, because if I looked a lot harder at all the people around me who were building really cool things and the lifestyle that they had, I think I would have chosen a little bit of a different path earlier on. And now it took me a few years, and now I'm on the right path that actually makes me happy and is very fulfilling.
Yeah, related to that, the thing I would say to my younger self is, why do you feel the need to perform? What is the why behind it? And speaking from my personal experience, and this was one of the larger realizations of my own mental health journey, was, I found myself just climbing the ladder, doing all the things that look good and are prestigious and may make money, but spiritually and emotionally, I was failing. As my career went up, all those other aspects were going down, and I had this just compulsion to just keep going, even though I felt terrible. And so that's what led to me really digging in to say, why do I keep pushing this hard when I don't need to anymore? Yet I feel addicted to it or stuck in that pattern. And the thing that I eventually unpacked was the why behind why I believed it was necessary for me to perform. And this is where coaching and therapy is so essential from a psychoanalytic approach, and really digging in through how previous life experiences can inform our subconscious way of operating. As I ultimately realized, like, wait, I'm doing this because deep down, I only believe that I'm lovable if I'm achieving, because those were the messages that I got early in life. And if I wasn't achieving, I wasn't a lovable person. And that was the thing that was under the hood around that relentless drive to just do more, do more, do more. And so that's the thing I would say to my younger self is, make sure you really understand the why and where that came from, and that'll set you free. Okay, here. And then we got one last question, and then we have to wrap it up. Are there any other mental models that you can share that would be helpful for founders to deal with stress? So sort of frameworks or just principled ways of thinking about handling stress.
I think maybe connecting your last thought there, Andy, is just understand what makes you happy, the why, and what makes you stressed, and not feeling the need to do the things that make you stressed. Either hire somebody to do that, decide that the company's not going to do that, or if you have that flexibility. I think I far too often in my last company played the victim of my circumstances and not recognize that I have full control over anything we do and everything we do and everything I spend my time on. And if I feel stressed by part of the job, I shouldn't feel like it has to be me that does that, or the company has to do that. So I don't know if that's meta advice, but it's understanding the why behind what's stressing you and editing it out if you can.
I found finding a group of really good founder friends who have no buy-in into my business and only really care about me as a person, and mentors, same thing, who don't have any buy-in on my business, aren't invested in my business, who just care about me as a person, is extremely helpful. So having that really strong network around you who they want to see you succeed, but they want to see you succeed in a healthy way is one of the best things that you could do.
That's great advice.
I think stress is different for everybody. People feel stressed differently. People are stressed out by different things. For me, it's like almost like a laundry pile, and I'm like, gotta find the threads of the thing and trace this fabric of what is the thing that's making me stressed right now, so I can remove it from my life or address it. So learning to put words and intentionality to what that is.
Yeah, related to the words point, like what I've observed is that there's one word that's usually behind a lot of stress, and that's the word should. It's like, oh, I should do this, I should be doing that, I should be doing it. And this is one of the tools that I use to modulate myself and just to identify unnecessary stressors. And what is when I find myself using the word should, I immediately say, I need to question where that came from. Should according to who? According to what? Like there's some external belief that I've probably adopted that is at the root of that should. Like, and usually the tasks that are shoulds are the ones that I cut first, and I just focus on the musts.
I heard a quote recently that said, comparison is the thief of joy. So I feel like it goes hand in hand with that quote.
Exactly. It's a great quote. Okay, well, I think that's all the time that we have. We're about 2 or 3 minutes over. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the